My name is Bintel Powell. I am the CEO of Bandit Publishing. I'm a former sales engineer. I've been in the field of sales for about 30 years and can't believe I'm even saying that. I started off as an engineer who knew nothing about sales, and now I'm running my own company. I've heard that salespeople, some of the things that I've heard in my 30-year career that were shocking was that salespeople make the most money out of anybody else on earth and are more likely to become CEOs of their own company than all other professionals combined, which I'm really proud of. Some of the things that I want to point out here, specifically to general managers and the sales managers, is that I've also heard that hiring salespeople who are the revenue driving force in any company, the worst thing you can do is hire a salesperson and then have to churn them or fire them in 3 or 4 months because they're not performing up to speed. And I believe that there is across the board in a lot of organizations, and I've experienced this in my own life, that a lack of training of salespeople and a lack of departing knowledge on them and how to go about selling accounts for the majority of this churn. I mean, I remember when I took my first sales job, my manager said to me, "Some things you just can't teach. You can't teach being a salesperson," which I emphatically disagree with. And in fact, when he said that to me, I thought that he was setting me up for failure. So that's the impetus behind this book. I believe that anyone can be trained to be a good salesperson. I studied engineering. Engineers typically are very antisocial people. So if I'm at the point after 30 years of being in sales where I have articulated a sales process in a book and I can speak, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I'd like to show you how we intend to do that with this book. Now, one of the most alarming things that I've heard about sales, which I believe is unfortunately true, is that being a sales manager is the worst job in all of corporate America, that you're essentially a babysitter. And I kind of understand that because my managers babysitted me when I first came into sales, fresh out of Northeastern, right out of the Snell building, full of engineering formulas, and I knew nothing about the real world. All I knew is that I wanted to get a job making missiles for World War III. And when I looked in the newspaper, to my shock, the highest paying jobs were not for the engineers, it was for the salespeople, 200 grand. So I was like, I want to be a salesman, motivated by money. And I landed a job, a sales engineering job at Canon USA, which was the best of both worlds. Great job. I sat next to some really amazing sales engineers like Robert Hafner, who was making $200,000 a year, and he could install the computer systems as well as sell them. But I knew nothing, and I was learning by the school of hard knocks. My managers would say to me, you can't teach sales, which I thought was caca. I thought they were setting me up for failure. But what I did notice was that the top sales performers, through all these different sales training classes that they flew us out to with every job I got, always the top sales performers in all these companies, AT&T, Canon, Sprint, Nortel, whatever company I worked for, and I worked for quite a few as a sales engineer, all of them, the top sales performers always saw themselves as their own CEOs. They just happened to be working for another more established company. They behaved like CEOs. They were their own bosses. They seemed to be above the law and above the sales managers. They didn't need the sales managers. And there was one reason, what I discovered after all these sales training classes in Texas and Florida, and you can fly out feeling you're a big shot, you're traveling, your pay is moving up every time you go get a new job. There was one thing that I discovered, a common theme. And that common theme was value. Value was the key. I mean, there were other things like time management and relationship building, and there were other things that were ancillary to that. But the main, most powerful sales closing tool was always a salesperson's ability to articulate and demonstrate value. The problem is, nobody knew what it was. I honestly think that there's a lot of sales managers out there that still don't know what it is. sales managers and salespeople that they sell on price, or they're tall and they have a deep voice, or they have a product that just has a lot of demand. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons. But the salespeople that consistently blew their numbers out, and eventually, I kept track of a lot of them, went off and became their own CEOs of their own companies, but really were magicians while they were working for any company that they were working for, that I was watching them do what they do. They understood, or had an intimate understanding of value, and could articulate to their customer, so that, as you know, nobody buys based on price. People buy on value. And the problem is, nobody was telling any of us. They certainly weren't telling me. It took me years, 20 years, maybe even longer, to really get a hold of what value was. And it's no doubt that the greatest investor in the history of the stock market is Warren Buffett. And this is what he says: price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? So with just the knowledge of value, and obviously other things like soft skills and questions and all these other things that make a real consummate sales professional, if your salespeople don't know what value is, excuse me, and don't know how to articulate value to the customer in a way that's not obvious, and expresses to the customer that I know your pain and I'm here to solve it, you're always, as a sales manager, going to have to be babysitting them. And that's one of the things that we can do for you with this book. Now, my mother was an English teacher from Jamaica who ruled with an iron hand when I was a boy. And as I started to get different jobs and different companies and move up to get more pay, what I noticed is that my managers would start putting these books on my desk to read, and they would threaten my life to read them. Who Moved My Cheese and How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Greatest Salesman in the World. I found that book in the garbage in front of a Dunkin' Donuts one night with me and my wife. I just went and picked up the book for some reason. I read the whole thing, and that was my introduction to reading again, which I had left alone for a long time because my mom would force me to read books all summer. And what do you know? As this grew and grew and grew, and I learned more and more and more, and started looking at things through the eyes of an engineer, one day I just decided to regurgitate everything that I'd learned in engineering and sales, and it ended up being a book called The Formula. And that's how it all happened. It was I guess you could say it was meant to be, and I honestly just regurgitated everything that I had experienced in this book, but I really didn't understand how to explain it to people once I'd finished writing it. I didn't understand how to explain it to sales managers as to what it could do for them. And then one evening, late night, I was watching some documentary on this guy, Elliot Spitzer, and he said he was looking into a specific transaction. He used that word, transaction, and that's when it dawned on me that I had created an engineering recipe in the form of a formula where you could anyone could engineer a successful financial transaction. And that's what this is. This is, if you can engineer a bunch of transactions, you can be a top sales performer. If you understand the elements of a successful financial transaction, like you put two pieces of hydrogen and one piece of oxygen together, voila, you get water. Even if you're not the sharpest tool in the shed, if you have two pieces of hydrogen, one piece of oxygen, you are going to have water. Well, that's part and parcel to what the formula is. And it is basic, I guess it's money engineering, if you'd like to say, or transaction engineering, but that's what it is. And for salespeople to be able to engineer a bunch of small or large transactions with a formula, it's a very, very powerful tool. And most important, in addition to obviously increasing sales, it takes a lot of the pressure off of you as a sales manager and as a sales GM. Now, not to get too nerdy, but these are the tools that I invented that will allow your salespeople, if you hire me, and I certainly hope you do, to sell at will, and if they really get into it, to think about, to problem solve at will, which is exactly what innovation is. It's coming up with a solution to a problem. And if you're thinking to yourself, and then most importantly, understanding academically what value is. Because if you can't explain what value is, you'll never be able to see value, you'll never be able to create value, and most importantly to you, gentlemen and gentlewomen, you'll never be able to sell it. If you do, it'll be hit and miss, right? But if you're asking yourself, well, why do my salespeople need to understand the thought process of innovation? The reason is explaining to your customer how the innovator thought about the idea and came up with the idea allows the customer to become intimately involved with the product and start to believe that the product was made specifically for them. The best way to tell somebody without telling them that this product was made. Now quickly in closing, because I've taken up enough of your good people's time, and your salespeople, and your time is your most important commodity. For one, when I found out that people like Warren Buffett, arguably at one time one of the second richest men in the world, all he does is sits in his office and reads books like this, I doubled down on self-help books and books like this. Additionally, when I found out that first-generation billionaires that come to America and become billionaires in one generation, when they were asked how they did it, they said, we read autobiographical business books. We read 6 of these a month. We don't waste time with anything but nonfiction. Reading books is the number one way they said that they became billionaires. And to think about me, I mean, there's tons of great books out there, but I don't know if there's another sales book coming from the eyes of a sales engineer that's articulating it through a money machine formula that's going to have the effect of you putting a book like this on your salespeople's desk, especially a new salesperson that has no sales experience and is terrified that they're not going to make their number and they're going to get fired. It's going to have such an impact on them. It's going to say to them, my manager cares about me. My manager wants me to succeed, because that's the way I felt when my managers put these books on my desk. It made me feel the same way my mother used to make me feel when she would force me to read. So, and lastly, if I'm fortunate enough to work with you and I walk into your office, your kids will be able to relate to me. I'm not an elderly gentleman who they can't relate to. I still look halfway durable. So when I walk into these sales offices and I start to talk to the kids and the young salespeople, I can develop a rapport with them that just giving them a book from Dale Carnegie or somebody who's maybe not even alive anymore is not going to have the same impact. I can really motivate them, and because in their mind they're going to say, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. So I really hope you'll consider this, and I really look forward to talking with you and earning your trust and allowing you to listen to a little bit of the audio book so that you can see that this is worth your time.